need to approve the minutes that, thank you, Liz.
So moved.
Yes.
Second?
Two sets.
September 26th and October
Liz,
10th.
are you taking minutes?
It's the 28th.
No. Liz?
What's his date?
Not hearing you. What's it today?
28th.
Liz, I can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Oh, you're loud and clear. It's so loud, it's kind of frightening.
Play loud in here too.
My apologies. All
Don't shut
right.
it down either. I'm not going to be able to take minutes because I've got my hands full.
Okay, no problem.
I
We will.
That's okay. All right.
Who
Patrick's
else
got,
needs
Patrick's
one?
took,
Patrick, you got one?
he took mine. It's okay.
No, I'll take one, sorry.
All right.
You can have one.
It helps.
Great.
Okay,
It's a good alternative,
update on the grant.
you know, view.
Uh,
I like that.
Dawn Lemon is the woman that I've been working with. She has not been officially appointed. We do have the grant. The process is we wait for Dawn to be appointed as the agent. She has already met with all the people who have submitted pre-applications.
Money is that?
And she didn't say how many, but I think it's at least 4 or 5.
Could we just explain this, what this grant is? Did we vote on the
again?
motion to approve the minutes?
Yeah, we did that.
We did? We
Okay.
seconded it.
We seconded it, but we didn't vote. Thank you, Bruce. All right. We have, Michaela's on. Great.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, terrific. We have a motion, forgive me, I'm rushing ahead, because I know we have a lot to cover. We have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes of our last 2 meetings. One was the sewer meeting with the members of the neighborhood, and then our meeting on September 26th. So we have a motion to approve. Liz, you want to start?
Hi, Liz.
I think that's an aye. Michaela?
Hi, Liz.
Yep, I'm Michaela.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Bruce. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Randy. Hi, Jan.
All
It's
right.
like it's unanimous. Now, forgive me, I was rushing ahead with this grant. This is a CBDG, which stands for Community,
Development block.
It's actually a CDBG grant, but that's all right.
right, yeah, well, the initials do get all confused, right? But it's a block grant, it's a federal grant that's given to the state, and the state decides how to pass it out, and we are the winners, along with Great Barrington and Egremont, which we're very happy about.
Fixes houses. Yeah.
And it allows people in those towns to fix their houses. But I brought, just so if anyone's interested, this is the paperwork you have to fill out in order to get this. So it's wonderful that Dawn is there to help you. But there are a lot of requirements, needless to say. But we do have this time, last time we didn't get anybody. This time we are going to get
But isn't it up to 40 grand person, something?
no, it's 50.
50.
And it can go up to 70 if you need.
And I've heard some people say that even if the stack was this high for 50 grand, they'd fill it out. So it's
Right.
not so bad.
It is a wonderful grant because if you're awarded it and you stay in your property for 15 years.
You don't have to pay it back.
It's forgiven. And every year after you get it, then you stay in your house, then 1/15 of it is forgiven. So it's a very, very, very attractive grant. And it's all about fixing up older homes. And it's really directed towards seniors and towards young.
And we're in a very similar proposal right now with that EPA Community Change Grant for 19 million that Berkshire Regional Planning put in. We're one of 4 towns that are identified in the environmental justice block that is qualified for, and that's a $19 million grant for home repair. 19 million.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of it'll be Pittsfield, obviously, but
Does it have a similar forgiveness aspect to it?
it's a grant. It's no forgiveness. It's not a loan.
It's not a loan, it's an outright grant. Fantastic. Can we use it for things like bridges?
No, it's only for home repair.
Wow,
Similar to what this is. yeah.
similar to this grant.
And we haven't gotten it yet, but we're one of 4 towns that are in on it with Berkshire Regional Planning.
Fantastic. So we would share it, right?
Yeah, I think it's Adams, us, Lee, and Pittsfield.
Fantastic.
15 years if it stays in the family, because if you have like elderly now, 15 years might seem like a long time, but if the house doesn't change, last name,
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
That's a very good question. My first guess is that probably
Well,
not.
Well, I don't know. They talk about if you sell the house,
correct.
but if you leave the house to somebody, it's not a sale.
We can get an answer.
It goes on a trust.
Yeah,
But we can
there is
get
an
it.
answer to that.
Intergenerational with.
There-
Get an answer.
There's definitely an answer to that. But Don is
I think that if you
absolutely
leave it
fantastic.
to your kids, that it would still
That's
count.
how you're gonna get the.
Staying in the, you know.
Right.
None of us know the answer though, because
But, yeah,
this can be arcane.
There, you have to meet the income requirements of median income.
Only when you apply though, not in the
That'll
future.
be the elderly.
Right. Yeah. It could be anybody.
Or young,
Yeah, correct.
or middle, if you aren't making past the median income. All right. Very quickly, the community preservation grant agreement has been modified. Michael has, and it's been worked out and I've signed it. So we have technically received the money, but it's just something that's transferred into our bank account.
This is the CPC money
The CPC money
from last year's grant.
from last year's grant, thank
We have
you.
another deadline coming up in like December
Yes.
2nd, I think, for the next application.
Is that right, Patrick?
Yeah, well, yeah, it goes every year.
We have to submit it.
But if we want more this year, we have to submit every year, yes.
Yes, but is it December? Do you know?
I know that it's coming up. I'm not sure that it's usually December or January, yeah.
I saw on the town website, I think it's December 2nd.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So we better,
Well, if you want me to write it again, I did last year.
that would be fabulous. I don't think we need a motion to appoint
Oh,
you.
you have the authority to
Before
appoint.
we write it, we should maybe have our conversation. Maybe that's a good one to talk about after we talk about what our priorities are.
Yeah. But we definitely, we need to decide what we're going to apply for, but
Right.
I think there's no question we need to apply. So we just need to get that on our calendar. We have, you must be, Eric. I wondered, we had these new faces sitting here. So thank you both for coming. Jan, before we go to the presentation, do you want to just make us aware? We have Jamie here.
Yeah. Hi, Jamie. I've made a request to have the housing production plan brought before the select board, hopefully on November 7th, which is the first meeting in November for the select board. So I will let all of you know if that changes, but otherwise, I think we're on the schedule to present at that meeting and have a discussion and hopefully reach approval from the select board for that.
Jamie, I believe you're chair.
Yes.
There's any reason that we probably won't appear on that?
I don't think I can discuss Patrick's here.
No, we can do scheduling this week.
It may or may not be. We have a very full agenda
On the 7th. So when will you let us know?
as soon as possible.
All right. That's a good political answer. Thank you. So unless we hear otherwise, we'll be on the board. All right. Eric, would you like to come forward and talk to us? Stand behind the podium and introduce yourself and your colleagues.
Yeah. My name is Eric Reardon. I'm the Berkshire Director with the Housatonic Valley Association. Joined here by my colleagues, Julia Rogers, Isabel Bronson from our land conservation team. I had the good fortune of meeting Patrick at the dedication to the Stockbridge Muncie Mohican trail signage just down the road here. In meeting with Patrick, I gave him just sort of a quick rundown of some of our sort of strategic initiatives that cover our work across the Housatonic watershed, 2,000 square miles, 3 states. One of which is Clean Cold Connected, and we are working with the town of Stockbridge and Lake Canal. So I haven't met person here yet. I don't know if he's in yet. And Christine Goretti over at the DPW to get funding for a stream channel restoration and culvert replacement project on Rattlesnake Mountain Road, which we did receive funding through the Division of Ecological Restoration for design and engineering work for that. So we're very excited about that. And on the land side of things, our strategic initiative, Follow the Forest, Patrick brought up this parcel that the town is working with. And I mentioned that perhaps there'd be an opportunity for us to come and give a presentation about how we're trying to integrate conservation benefits into municipal properties. And so I think what I'll do is I'll turn it over, and Julia has brought some slides and some maps and some other items to share with you folks and discuss some potential opportunities to integrate conservation into what you have planned for this property. So
Great, thank you. Do any of you have the ability to enable screen share?
Yes.
Ooh, okay, awesome. Because we can do it without slides too, but I like maps and visuals. Okay.
Let's see more. Chat reactions. How's that?
Let's see. Oh, you did it. Thank you. Okay, for folks in the room, it's going to appear on the screen behind you. So either you get to look at me and Isabel, or you get to look at the screen. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having us. So my name is Julia Rogers. I'm the Senior Land Protection Manager with the Housatonic Valley Association, and we have Isabel Bronson as well. And I'm really excited to talk with you all today about this work that we do under Follow the Forest. And so on the map in the back of the room, what you can see is the area that we are looking at under Follow the Forest. And it is this climate resilient wildlife corridor that starts where the Appalachian Trail crosses the Hudson River down near Cold Spring, New York, and extends north through the Housatonic watershed, which you can see outlined in blue, and extends all the way north into Vermont and extending into Canada. And our goal is to work with partners to protect and connect this corridor. So we do this in a number of ways. We work with partners, so towns, land trusts, and other conservation organizations to really think strategically about the landscape to say, where are those critical places where conservation is really key to preserving climate resilience, to sequestering carbon, to ensuring we have space for wildlife to move on our landscape? And where are the places where we also need space for humans to be able to occupy and to build out resilience for our communities in terms of things like affordable housing or other needs for our communities? So we're really thinking about this, not just from the conservation perspective, but also how do we do this, in a holistic, rounded way? Our work involves work with those partners, and it also involves local community scientists giving us feedback and information. We can take some information from computer modeling using mapping, but it's really folks on the ground who can provide us that information that helps us to understand what's happening locally so that our work is both local and effective at a local scale, but also regional and really significant for the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. So the main part of our work are core forests. And when we're talking about core forests, we're talking about contiguous interior forests that are over 250 acres in size. So we've removed what I call edge forest, essentially the forest that is alongside roads or houses or other things that are fragmenting that forest and are really only accounting for that interior forest. And that's because interior forests are getting more and more rare on our landscape, and there's a collection of wildlife that really rely on that interior forest as part of their life cycle. And so it's really key that we preserve these large spaces of forest for them and for us. I'm sure a lot of folks in this room know this, but these core forests are providing so many different ecosystem services or benefits for us and for wildlife. They filter the water that we drink, the air that we breathe, and they're providing habitat And they're also protecting habitat like cold water streams for brook trout, and really just providing a lot of key benefits on the landscape. Isabel, I think I'm turning it over to you.
And so when we're thinking about these core forests and when we're thinking about connectivity, we don't want our forest cores to become isolated islands in the landscape. We want to make sure that wildlife and plants can all move northward and adapt as our climate's changing and warming. And so as we were thinking about identifying connections between our mapped core forests, we used a model that was created by Scott Jackson and his lab based in UMass. And you'll see the picture on the left here. Is showing all of these dark lines kind of weaving throughout the landscape. They kind of look like a network of roadways, but these are what he's mapped as being high priority movement corridors for wildlife. So the darker the green lines throughout the landscape, kind of the more higher importance or higher quality movement way you can think of it. And these are all least cost pathways. So these are the easiest ways for wildlife to navigate fragmenting features such as big roadways throughout the landscape.
And where are we on the map?
Where are we? Let's see, we're probably,
I know we're in the southwest, right?
here's the corner of Massachusetts.
Can't see that far.
And so I would imagine that,
And we'll have more maps that
yeah, I'd say
show
we're
you better where
probably
you are.
right in here.
Yeah.
So there is a pretty interesting wildlife corridor that goes east-west, kind of adjacent to the town of Stockbridge. And so we looked at this model and then we overlaid our core forests on it. And we tried to identify really good connection points between our core forests. So all of these purple circles that you see on the picture on the float to my right are what we've identified as being potential habitat or wildlife linkages based on this modeling.
Can we, I'm sorry, but I'm completely disoriented. Is there a way that you can, someone can walk up there and actually point as to where we are? And
Other maps that kind of show us in the context of these models, these are kind of just to get us to grasp the larger concept.
okay,
But we're probably somewhere right in here, sorry,
I
right?
think that's south. I think you were right.
Right up here, yeah.
Up to that purple.
Yeah, so I think we're probably somewhere right in here in this corridor. And so you do see there are some significant darker lines showing some good wildlife connectivity and movement opportunities. And so ideally, we want to secure one habitat or wildlife linkage between each of our core forests. And so this requires us now ground truthing this modeling information. So the science is great, but we want to really understand and gain the knowledge that community members have and have them go out and help us assess these linkage and give us a broad understanding of what the landscape is looking like. So we developed a community science tool that is up on our website, which is followtheforest.org. And using this community science tools, people can go out and assess a wildlife linkage that's near them that maybe they're super familiar with, that they have tons of local knowledge about. And when they're heading out, they're looking for signs of wildlife. So what sorts of animals are around you? Have you seen wildlife in this area in the past? Do you currently see scat or tracks or maybe even roadkill? And I think it's important to mention that a lot of our linkages are crossing roadways. So this tends to be a tool that's very road focused and how wildlife are navigating between core forests and crossing the roadways in between. So you're looking for signs of wildlife around the roadway. You're kind of assessing what is the habitat on either side of the road. Is it really nice forested habitat? Maybe it's agricultural, maybe it's a lawn. You're exploring if there's a closed canopy over the roadway. That's really great for squirrels, especially flying squirrels, to use to kind of navigate and to not actually have to be on the ground crossing the road itself. So we ask you to explore is there closed tree canopy. And then we also ask you to look at what sort of infrastructure helps with wildlife movement that's currently there. Are there culverts or bridge underpasses that are large enough for a wide array of animals to kind of go underneath roadways to avoid the dangers of cars? And we specifically say dry passage because we recognize that a lot of culverts are regularly filled with large amounts of water. And there are pretty wide array of wildlife species that don't want to get their feet wet. So ideally this culvert, this passage is dry a decent amount of the time, allowing wildlife to move through it. And small culverts are going to be great for squirrels or small rodents. And larger culverts are really going to be amazing for black bear, for moose, for deer, for bobcat, for any of our larger mammals. So we ask you to kind of look at the positives. What's going right here and what's helping wildlife navigate the landscape? But we also recognize that there are significant barriers to movements across our roadways. So we ask our volunteers to explore the road conditions. How busy is this road? How fast is the traffic moving? We ask you to look at barriers that are alongside the roads. Are there tall fences that would make it really hard for something maybe like a mama bear with cubs to navigate? But also recognizing that those barriers are species specific. So that tall fence may be really hard for baby animals to get over, but it might be really easy for a squirrel to pass through. So we also ask you to look for steep embankments, which could be a man-made or a natural feature. Really anything that's developed and human-built on the side of our roadways. And then we ask you to use all of this knowledge to rate the linkage. So now you've looked at what are the good things, you've looked at maybe some of the challenging things and the barriers to wildlife movement. And overall, we then ask our volunteers to give us a linkage rating. So do you think this linkage is excellent for wildlife? Could wildlife easily pass? Do you think this linkage is good or fair, or is it really poor? Is it really developed? Is there tons of fast moving traffic? Is there a lot of development on either side of the roads? And based on all that, you submit this data to us, we review it and update our map to show that the linkage has now been assessed. And then we get to really partner with other organizations and think of maybe some restoration ideas like culvert replacements, which will be great for, as we're thinking about climate resiliency, but it's also great for wildlife. So then we get to use all this information to think about how can we make these linkages more wildlife friendly? What are the things we can do to kind of modify the roadways to make it just a little easier for wildlife to navigate? And so we've worked with schools, we've worked with local land trusts to implement this, but we've also done a significant amount of education work in schools, a lot in Connecticut, but also working with beat staff in Southern Massachusetts to really engage youth and any community members who are interested to kind of get a different perspective of the landscape. Maybe they travel every day on their way to school and just see the environment through a slightly different lens.
So that's like the quick overview of Follow the Forest. And I think now it's really helpful to bring it down to the town level. So the map that we're showing on the screen shows the town of Stockbridge. And I'll walk you through the different data layers that we're looking at. So in green and orange are the core forest. So those 250 acre blocks of interior forest. In green are core forests that are over 50% protected. So if you aggregate the amount of protected land within that core forest, it's at least 50% of the acreage of that core forest. So you can see on the southern end of town, as you all are probably familiar with, a lot of those areas are really well protected core forests. In orange are core forests that are under 50% protected. So there's less protected land within those core forests. And we've set a goal of trying to get each of these core forests to at least 50% protected so that they're providing that climate resilience, that carbon sequestration, and that habitat for wildlife. In black cross-hatching, that at least to my eyes from this side of the room is a little bit hard to see, shows that protected lands. It's the protected and recreational open space data layer. So not all of that land is permanently protected. It's also some open space, but that might help you get your bearings. And then in purple are the purple circles that we showed on an earlier map. And these are the circles that we drew based on that really cool, complicated mapping to say, let's simplify it a little bit and say, these are the areas that the modeling has identified as important for wildlife movement and ecosystem connectivity. Now let's have folks go out there and really understand it. So those that are filled in are ones that folks have gone out and assessed. And those that are not filled in, that might be a little bit harder to see from over here, are ones that haven't been assessed, that we still need more data and information to understand how they work on the ground and what that looks like. And after volunteers assess linkages, they get refined. So some linkages will get moved based on what you see as the on the ground conditions. They might get modified and narrowed. And so it really helps us to understand this regional connectivity modeling at a really local level. And it can also help us to understand our landscape, to say, okay, here are some of the keys to a good functioning ecosystem. We didn't particularly talk about wetlands or the importance of agricultural landscapes, but here are some of the keys for maintaining climate resilience on our landscape. Here's how they connect. And now we can sort of put all these pieces together to say, what does this mean for developments we're thinking about, or what does this mean for other needs within our community? So it's one lens for looking at the landscape. And I want to stop there and ask you all if you have any questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, just maybe a definition of what protected means. Something is 50% or less, or 50% or more. What protections are you talking about?
So from the data layer that I'm showing on the screen, we pulled all of the permanently protected lands. So that would be lands that are conserved by the State Department of Conservation and Recreation, any lands held by a land trust, any lands encumbered by a conservation easement, and if a municipality owns land that has some sort of designation. So it's been designated at a town board level, or it was donated as a piece of restricted land. That's generally what encompasses permanently protected.
And the yellow ones that are not protected, what does that mean? Or less than 50% that they're.
So that means that the acreage of all of those lands that I just defined to you doesn't reach half of the acreage of that core forest. So the core forest on the northwestern edge of town, if I were to eyeball it, right, are we looking at like?
It's just developable. It's not restricted to current.
Yeah.
So it might be in a wetland, so it's not developable, but it's potentially something where somebody could.
Exactly.
You say it's not owned by the state, it's more privately held?
It may be privately held, yes. It could be a municipality could own bits and pieces of some of these, right, and just not have a restriction on it. But likely, for the most part, it's going to be privately held land.
For some privately held land is in a conservation restriction,
Yes,
so it's not necessarily
Yeah, yep.
We have two very active trusts in Stockbridge. The Stockbridge Land Trust and also the Berkshire Natural Resources Council. Both.
I put Laurel Hill down.
Laurel Hill.
And Laurel Hill. Could you tell us who has done the assessments on the two purples?
From this map, I could not tell you, but I can pull that data for you. And so all of this data lives on our website, followtheforest.org, and there's an interactive map there. And this is one of my favorite parts of the work that we do. It sort of works like Google Maps. You could type in your home address and go see how you fit within this landscape. And you can also then click on the purple circles and see who assessed it and what sorts of information they gave us. So I can't tell you off the top of my head. We've done some work with Berkshire Natural Resources Council. I haven't yet worked with the Stockbridge Land Trust or Laurel Hill. So it's possible it was someone BNRC related. It's also, or BEAT. It's also possible that it was an HVA summer employee. We've been working with some of our summer interns to incorporate this into the work they do.
And what was that website again?
Followtheforest.org.
So for the two pink ones that have been
Yeah.
assessed, are there specific recommendations that you come up with for how to address?
Yes, so the volunteers gave us all sorts of information as it relates to the habitat on either side of the road and the barriers. And then the volunteers also get to tell us what they think the best solution is. So I like to tell folks to think big. Like, I get to think about all the barriers to some aspirational solution for wildlife crossing, but I want volunteers to give me that information that's like, if we had no financial barriers or no barriers, what is the thing that would fix this area? And so we have that information, and then we take that in, and so much of what HVA does is founded with our partners. So usually once we get this information, then I go back out to the partner and I say, okay, here's what we have. Maybe it's at the town scale, maybe it's at a county scale. Here's what we have. Here's the data our volunteers collected. how does this fit with how you're thinking about the landscape and how can we develop an action plan from there?
Do you have any information on how many animals and what kind of animals are in this whole corridor? Like populations?
By bug or by mammal or
Yeah, like by mammal, like how many mountains?
insect? Is that more?
Don't say none of that.
That's a question that I've never been asked, and I could not give you numbers on biodiversity in this corridor, but now that you asked me that, I kind of want to go look up some statistics.
I'm sure
Yeah.
some of them exist, and I'm sure, I mean, on a less cheery note, the DOT has done some like roadkill mortality assessments. And maybe that gives you some slightly skewed idea of what's happening or what's most commonly crossing these roadways, which could indicate higher populations in the region, or maybe just a willingness to travel the roadway itself. So maybe that's a little hard to say, but it could maybe paint a picture of what's going on.
Well, I'm asking in part because the recommendations of how one might address that.
Very specific.
Yeah, and some of the recommendations that might be very expensive would be for animals that we don't have any information that they are even in this corridor.
And so that's one of the
Or
pieces
whatever.
when we get the data, we ask about habitat sort of as a proxy, right? Like you don't have to be a wildlife ecologist to fill out the form. We really want it to be something you saw in the pictures. There were middle schoolers out doing this.
Mhm.
And so from the habitat types, we can then pick up like, who are the species that are most likely to be using this? In some areas, right, it's going to be a key crossing for salamanders. And in other areas, if we're working with the DOTs, we're probably thinking about black bears and deer. And those are the most common larger species. Maybe you get the occasional moose around here. I'm going to guess that moose are not overly common here. But I do have a crossing in Route 7 where we identified the crossing, we had volunteers assess it, and a moose got hit there. And so we are like, where those would be the bigger species I'm thinking about. But you're right that we're not going to build crossing for elk or other species that are moving on sort of those big migratory pathways like you see out west. So we definitely, the pieces of tailoring solutions for each crossing really is depending on what habitat is there and who's most likely to be moving there.
I've got just a couple of questions. One, and more just an observation. One, neighbors could participate where there's actual animal sightings. I think there are some of the best folks who are able to participate in this. So as we're looking at volunteers, that's a great opportunity to, inform
We
what's
also
there.
do have on the website, in addition to this linkage crossing, we do have kind of a wildlife sighting broader form that people can then fill out and submit and maybe then help inform populations that are also in the area.
So how does that?
Wait,
Oh, sorry.
So I want to start at the top and then narrow down to the purpose of this meeting. At the top level, and Jamie is on our Conservation Commission, and so I'd love to get her take as well. It seems like at the top level, town level, we have two boards that are more primarily focused than this board on the presentation you just made. One is our Agriculture and Forestry Commission, and the second is our Conservation Commission. And as we look at wildlife corridors at the town level, I think that, talking about a town level project would make a whole lot of sense with either or both of those boards working together or independently or whatever. We also have another board, the Campusa Bog Stewardship, and where there's some globally rare species there, also makes sense to bring them in. So we've got several kind of conservation-oriented boards that this makes sense on. In terms of this meeting, we are, a woman named Coke Forbes commented at a prior meeting about, some of the challenges in this neighborhood around habitat. And this neighborhood abuts with a road in between a relatively large preserve at Upper and Lower Bucker Woods, which are two conservation properties owned by the Laurel Hill Association. And so, in terms of, kind of what we're looking at, which is, we had a nice, generous family donated a parcel to us and trying to figure out what, if anything, we might want to do with it. And with the observation from the neighbors about how important it is for some habitat issues, it would be interesting to kind of see specifically how these, how the relationship in this neighborhood applies to this. And I think that that's kind of the universe of relevance to this board, but I would certainly encourage other town boards to look at the larger picture, because you look at the map and the purple circles and, these are really important issues where we've got a great deal of
Yeah, and one of the things that I think would be really helpful for like site specific is to go out on the ground and say, okay, let's take a look at the assessment form and walk the area together and say, what does this look like in terms of how, how we're articulating what the barriers are and what sort of information does that give us about the landscape? One of the other things I would say that I think is particularly relevant for this board, we've been working with a subset of towns in Northwest Connecticut to really bring together affordable housing and conservation to sort of understand like, what are the suite of things that our communities need and that folks are advocating for? And where do we have overlap and where do we also sit on polar opposite sides, right? It's not always like happy overlapping, but it's always great to say, okay, what are these different perspectives? What do we all need? And where can we come together? And like, how can we talk through all of these pieces? And Follow the Forest has been one of those really key parts of our discussions across the conservation and affordable housing sectors to really say, what are the key places on the landscape? And so it's fun to be here too, to say like, how does this fit with your understanding of the landscape and what, all of the different needs?
It would be very helpful, as Patrick just said, this board owns 34 acres. And I don't know whether you can find it or not on your map, but
Is the parcel
it's on what's called Glendale Middle Road.
probably, right? And
In fact, and some of the people at the meeting are,
on our map. Yeah, so I think that's the parcel that you were just speaking about, right?
yes, now where is it? That's a
Go
wonderful,
back out one. We're looking at the vicinity that's like in here.
so right now, that our parcel is not identified in your core forest.
It is not within a core forest.
It's only 34 acres. It could be. I mean, it's, yeah.
Well, and like a 34-acre parcel could be part of a core forest. In this instance, there's enough other things going on that it's not part of a core forest.
But is it about one across the street?
So on the map that's being displayed, I put on aerial imagery, but the green on the left-hand side of the map that Isabel's showing with the cursor is a core forest. And then across the river. And this is looking at core forests at 250 acres in size. And it's not looking at any other filters, right? So from like a conservation standpoint, it's really good to also not just think about large forests, but also rare species, other interesting habitats. You mentioned Kampusa Bog, there's other interesting things going on that we won't pick up with Follow the Forest. So just like the caveat to throw
Is that
out
the Swan property?
Yes. Yeah.
The big giant one is the one that has been, that the state gave the grant for the Mohegans to purchase.
The yellow outline.
Up here.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So what's on green here or on the map that I just uploaded on mine? That's core forest?
Yes. Yep.
And then Laurel Hill has a property right here.
Patrick.
And that's not in.
Yeah, that's right.
Patrick.
And Upper Bucker is across the street.
And then that's
Glendale
the
Middle.
migration of the animals here because the river separates it off.
Core forest.
So what was really interesting as I was diving into the maps, if you look at the connectivity data, so you see that purple circle that goes east-west on the map, the connectivity data shows a strong connection between the two green core forests outlined on either side. And it's this sort of interesting connection, right? Because you're crossing.
Is that Beartown?
Yes, that would be Beartown, right? Because there's the center of town and that's the backside. So yeah, we're getting into Beartown.
It's really like Laurel Hill and,
I don't know. I think that's Ice Glen.
It's right there.
Yeah, it's ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a road. Yeah.
What about the large piece that's dark? It has a little bit of green in it. What is that?
This is what they have on the map there.
Right above the
This is all
purple.
core forest. This is
Little
Ice Glen.
mound.
The black crosshatching, is that what you're seeing?
Well, I can't see whether there's cross-hatching from here, but
Left-hand
I
side
think
of
you're
them.
seeing some crosshatching and that's protected land or open space.
You mean right here?
no, go down, Peter, go down,
It's a golf club.
go to the purple.
Property up here.
Is that Hans's?
Hans is it?
Yeah.
That's probably the golf course, because Tom should be. I think this whole, where he turned is slipping along, I think that's.
So, I mean, I don't want.
What I was interested, Peter, could you put your finger on the purple down at the bottom? That one. Now, right to sort of northwest, there's, yes, that area. That's a fairly large piece.
That's a tract of forest that's less than 250 acres in size. Even though it kind of looks like it connects to this core forest here, there is a road that fragments that. And so then in our
Thank you, Peter.
landscape, we don't technically count that as a core forest. That doesn't diminish that it does hold habitat value for wildlife. And it doesn't diminish that any of these small tracts of forest hold value, and they might hold important connectivity values. Wildlife is traveling up and maybe into this little forest type, and then maybe they're crossing into here and traveling landscape. So small patches of forest can help with kind of connectivity and moving to those core forests as well.
So did you say that purple sort of the oblong there that's running east and west, is that a corridor?
Yeah.
It's an area to be looked at by community scientists.
All right.
The connectivity data suggests there is a good connection there. I'd be curious to get out on the ground and really understand each of those roadways. It is, like just from looking at the data, right? It's a long stretch and there's a lot going on in between there. And I've actually since modified this oval from this rendition of the map, because you can see right now the oval goes through the solar development, which it may not be like the best place for movement. So it'd be interesting. It's one of those places to investigate further, that it has promise for connectivity, but we don't know.
So it looks as though the Morris property outlined in yellow is sort of sitting right in the middle of that potential corridor. So is it your opinion, based on what you know so far, that it would be disruptive to the pathways to be putting housing back in there with roadways and stuff?
I mean, that's the process we're talking about. Yeah, that's of course the question that they're here to answer, not.
Well, I mean, it's the question that we boil down everything that you've said to us so far. That's our responsibility. And I'm just trying to get a sense of what.
I personally think that maps give us a perspective, but I wouldn't want to answer that question without being on the ground, because we can stare at maps all day, right? I do it all day. I love maps. But until really understanding, you all understand the local conditions far better than I do. And until really being on the ground, it's really hard to say like what is actually happening, other than what, the story, the pieces, the maps can start to get put together. But without being on the ground, it's, I wouldn't want to answer that question.
Well, how would we determine what's going on in that oblong? Because again, this property is sitting right in the middle of it.
So generally what we do with community scientists, usually we don't have access to most of the properties, right? It's really a roadway assessment. So we'd assess each roadway that cuts through there. It's hard to tell from this map. I think there's a couple, maybe 2 or 3.
They're just country road.
But we do have access to this property because both the property across the street is in a public trust and this property is owned now by the trust, this trust. So,
yeah,
We know there's a lot of wildlife there. It's just a matter of, you name it.
Yeah, but clipboard-
Squirrel, maybe,
It's always been.
Yeah.
It's been a forest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I
Follow the power lines down and they
Yeah.
can't go to the gravel bed, so they cut through this way, then, they don't cross the river because it's very wide. And then that's one of the unique things in Stockbridge in general is we only have like 3 major highways that cover the whole town, the Turnpike, Route 7, 183. The rest are just like on this road, small country roads where you're not gonna build a structure for crossing. We don't even have white lines on the side of the road. But yeah, that's interesting how you got the 2 main forests that are connected by a pretty wide, that's a pretty wide band.
When you're referring to the band, is that between those
lines.
2 purple lines?
Yeah.
And the air, because we're right between.
Yeah.
We're right in the middle of it.
From a process perspective, what is like step 1 through step N?
I would say a site visit might be a really good next step, and we would bring our linkage assessment form, and together we could think about like what this landscape looks like, and what this lens articulates there. I will say this is not a tool for like deciding whether or not development should happen. It's a tool for helping us understand the landscape. And so I think it's like one piece to the puzzle. And I know you all have some other studies helping to articulate this, some of the development on this property. But I would just say, like this is one lens where it's never going to be a like yes or no answer, right? It's a way of thinking about our landscape and thinking about how we piece together. But I would be really happy to go out and do a site visit with you all.
And Jamie, if we're going to do a site assessment or have this conversation, I think it's really important that Matt, as the chair of Agriculture and Forestry, and either Jamie as the representative for Concom or Ron Broker get involved and are invited to be part of that. I think that should happen before we actually schedule.
Yeah.
Do Habitat generally follow electrical utility lines?
It depends on the species that you're talking about. It can be and how the power line is managed. It can be fantastic early successional habitat and sort of serve as like grassland connectors. It can be really challenging for those species that will not cross into more open areas, or where that level of a disturbance to the forest brings in noise or light or other things that are going to shift or change that forest. So it's really one of those.
I mean, they'd be exposed, some of them in that area, I suppose,
But for some species, that corridor habitat can be really critical. There's been some management in Connecticut with the New England cottontail and using right-of-ways, utility right-of-ways to connect habitat for New England cottontail. So like but it really depends. Sometimes power companies manage those right-of-ways in such a way that it's not beneficial to wildlife. So it depends a lot.
If you work with DEP data, do you find it to be accurate? I mean, in this instance, we're talking about designated wetlands. I don't know when that designation was made.
I have worked with all sorts of GIS data, and GIS data, mapping data is challenging. It gives us, and that's sort of why I answered the last couple of questions the way I did. It gives us one lens, but as you dive into like our core forests, you'll start to see that sometimes there's a house or a road that shows up under the data. And it's sort of just a nature of how data like this has to be created, right? We created this data at a really large, for a really large land mass. And so we can only be so accurate. And so I would say for any data, it depends. And it depends on how the data is created and how it's defined.
Just one more question. I think given the sensitivity of this development site, in terms of development site, I know you recommended Jamie and some others, but it might be very helpful for those of us on the ground who live in the neighborhood to come, to participate. Do you have examples of where development, in spite of its best intentions, has affected wildlife movement? I mean, as a policy document?
As a policy document, not off the top of my head. Let me think about it. My initial answer to you was going to be that I think a lot of our development unintentionally impacts wildlife, even like with the best intentions, right? We're refining the natural world as it is. So whatever we want to do with, and even the best development is still going to have an impact on something. And a lot of it to make it a little more concrete depends really on how the development is done. I've talked with some municipalities about fencing, where there have been challenges with a desire for large properties to be fenced. And obviously like that's going to have a direct impact on wildlife movement and therefore ecosystem connectivity. The other thing that comes to mind, just like off the top of my head, that's one of the big issues is how we manage our trash, and therefore that black bears and other species are drawn into our neighborhoods because we often don't have the best tools at hand for managing trash. So like those are two examples that come to mind off the top of my head. But I'd have to do some other thinking for your question.
Why Many of us despise the fencing that sometimes gets put around properties for no reason. I mean, if you've got livestock or something, I understand it, but.
Well, these big solar arrays usually have fences and that's a big piece of property. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it have fencing of the solar array?
usually they do. I don't know about ours.
Ours does. Ours
Does it?
Does it?
And
I know a guy in the fencing business and he said that
And the
when they went solar,
Mm-hmm.
between solar and marijuana growing, they're just like, everybody needs fences.
I think it's important to mention also, is the two previous owners, both the Swans and the Morrises, actively were obviously concerned about this land, and they did do, I think it was, is it chapter 61 with the
Yeah,
forestry?
yeah.
So they did their preventative or whatever you want, maintenance cutting at times in order to really, preserve the habitat of the animals in this area. And I commend them for doing that for probably the last, 80 to 100 years. So this is, I'm sure, a pretty established home.
Okay.
Do you have anything else,
I
Patrick?
do. I actually have something that's only tangentially related, but since we have them here, I wonder, with your permission, I could ask.
Sure.
Do you guys work with Emma Sass, MVP? Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness?
We have worked with towns to go after MVP grants.
All right, so we got a note from Emma. I got a note from Emma today because we had talked last year about a grant possibly around pocket forest or a Miyawaki forest. Is that ever anything you've worked on, small parcel? I mean, she's kind of encouraging it, looking at ways to reforest on smaller spaces and encourage us to put a grant application in. I was wondering if.
I'd be happy to look at the particular with that parcel and
Okay.
go through different options. But we have partnered with towns on MVP.
Okay.
grants in the past.
Okay, so maybe we could talk.
Absolutely.
The forest you mentioned, if you're looking for an example, I know that a land trust down in Bridgeport, Connecticut has been working with the community to put in a Miyawaki
Yeah,
forest.
and there's a couple in Massachusetts that have been
Yeah.
wildly successful.
Yeah, and I only know like
No
bits
pun
and
intended.
pieces about it.
Yes.
Share what,
It's a form of restoration on a really small piece of land. You might know more than I
That's
do.
exactly what it is. And when you start talking about the pockets here,
Yeah.
over town land, it kind of makes a lot of sense to create that corridor. And it's basically, it's a way to jumpstart a tiny forest in a tenth of the time that normally takes for a forest of nature to, it's basically kind of,
but you plant large trees?
it's sort of like, it's like
I-
Star Trek episode where they create the planet.
A lot of vegetation pretty dense.
Yeah, that's right.
My understanding, I'm
Yeah.
definitely not an expert. I know bits and pieces, but you plant a lot of vegetation densely with the idea that they're sort of supporting each other, out competing non-native invasive plants, and it's going to grow and flourish as a whole, as opposed to, it's sort of like when you plant your garden.
That's right.
And you leave a lot of open space and then the leaves come up. It's like out competing.
Yeah, and it blocks out the sun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that,
This is absolutely fascinating, and as we've mentioned, we do own a parcel. It looks like, at least in your sphere of interest. And I think that we certainly would like to follow up. And I know the neighbors who are here, who own property around our property, also have, are part of the connectivity. And I guess you have lived with many friends visiting you that were perhaps invited and not invited.
I saw mountain lion.
Yes, and also
possibly.
it has been a big article recently in the Eagle about, is it mountain lions or bobcats?
Mountain lions.
Mountain-
There's lots of bobcats, but mountain lions are
That would be a big story.
very rare.
It would be a big story, yeah.
Sort of, didn't have a camera at the time. But I would suspect that now that we are familiar with your work, we'll have our cameras with us so that we can.
And we must
All
have
right.
a copy of this presentation either to the board or to Michael so that we can.
Yeah,
Perfect.
absolutely.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
So-
if you can please send it. I'll give you mine and I'll distribute it.
Does somebody besides me want to or want to join me in doing this follow-up? Because I would like to coordinate with the other boards and, kind of but if anybody else, if this is of interest to anyone,
I mean, we can be the leaders in particularly for our going on our property.
no, I meant just in terms of like what next steps, like in terms of like, we're going to have to do some coordination both with these folks and with folks on other boards.
I think that's what a lot of us are looking for. What's the next step?
Yeah. So I'm thinking I'd reach out to the chair of Concom and the chair of agriculture and forestry and and these guys, and then if someone wants to share an email that could then rebroadcast, I'd be happy to kind of keep everyone.
Patrick, are you focusing on just our property or for the whole town?
I think we have to answer both questions. We have a question in the neighborhood that is, that I think that is a specific ask, but yeah, these guys are free, so we might as well it's the right price, if you know what I mean.
I'm just trying to get whatever we're going to do as a next step,
I mean, would it
focused
be
on
to
what it
find
is.
out that oblong piece outlined by
Yeah.
purple, is that the mission?
Yeah, I
Determine
think
what's going on in there.
for us to go out.
Is that like a couple of miles? would you
Areas
say?
together.
How long do you think that was?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can do some research before we go out, and what I would start with would be assessing the roadways in that area, sort of from like the landscape context of, right? We just looked at that map of how we fit in the picture, and then and folks who are on the ground, you all know this area so much better than I do, right? Like the maps only tell me so much. I don't think I've ever been to this part of Stockbridge. So I would rely on all of you to say, okay, I can navigate us on a map, but here are the key areas.
Peter-
Let's look at those roadways and really start with that linkage assessment and then inform the conversation.
So Peter and I could take you out, if you want to do the pre-assessment, just give him, everyone knows my number. It's 441-5231. And feel free to call me. And Peter, do I have your number, or just write it down if you don't want to put it on the camera?
Just to get a little more focus to this, we own 34 acres. We have a specific interest in our property. If we wanted to start someplace where you could get some detailed information, we can allow full access to our property. There are the Laurel Hill property is abutting our property. So if you wanted to start and get very detailed information about a very focused part of this corridor, that's one approach. Another is to do what you were saying, which is to rock the roadways, which I guess you're more
I would say the key is
accustomed to.
I might point you to other resources for a biodiversity assessment or something that is, this tool is really not going to refine like where on a property is good for development or not. It's going to help us.
Which it wouldn't be the question.
Yeah.
The question would be with you is where is this corridor? What animals are moving through it?
Yeah.
And with our particular property, while it's small, it's got enough size. That's one thing. If we're just going to do a helicopter approach, then our property is just one of.
No,
But you have some very specific people interested, and there's more of them than the three that are sitting right there, that are interested in what we're examining, what to do, and then there's our whole town, which is fairly small. We're a little dot, so we're a minuscule dot, our land, and then the town is a little larger dot. So I guess we ought to, and Patrick is trying to incorporate, has suggested very usefully that other interested members of our town. So the question is really, what is the most appropriate next step from your point of view?
I would love
With our town.
go out and assess this particular linkage with any of the interested folks, you all, the two other commissions mentioned, the neighbors, whomever would be interested in joining us. So we can think specifically about like wildlife connectivity in that vicinity. And then that too can inform future connectivity work in town. It can sort of be the initial.
Let the map back up. So you're talking about the land between the purple lines
Yes.
as it goes across our town.
As it goes across this parcel and connects to the rest of the town. I mean, this is a corridor, so, by definition, we're looking at,
So,
east-west or north-south, but yeah.
But I have another question. So in addition, if you're looking at the connections of the large pieces of forest, the two green at the bottom, and then the orange up at the top, which I understand isn't, more than 50%, but you also have a circle over there. And it would seem to me to really understand the whole wildlife patterns, you'd really need to look at not only the horizontal one, but also, what are the options, or what does it look like to go north? Because maybe the animals would come around and go north and not go across.
Yeah, and that's right, like that's the piece of putting all the pieces
Yeah.
of our work together. It's never about one of these individually, it's sort of about the whole. But also the Housatonic, that one goes across the Hoos, which might make passage interesting. And if the landscape were all forested, wildlife would move anywhere, right? If we had it come along and changed the landscape, they'd move anywhere. So right now, the assumption too, right? This is a relatively mixed landscape. Wildlife are probably moving pretty freely. So it sort of narrows us down to like, what are the key places? And if given, if restrained, where are the places that are necessary? That's sort of, right? Because you're all probably looking at me like, I see deer, I see bear every day, right? So there are pieces where wildlife are moving pretty freely, but we really want to understand what are the key places in the landscape.
Okay.
I think as like a 50,000-foot view too, you guys could do a little bit of background on before the meeting and look at like the major structures. Like we have 2 huge gravel beds on the backside, so not much wildlife is going there because it's bare, steep hills, hot in the summertime. Definitely the Housatonic River. To the left of this property, they've cleared a lot of land with the cell tower, the old dump, and all the solar arrays. So I'm assuming that's squeezing animals one way versus exploring that area, plus the fences. So if we have those big milestones that are, within 100 yards of this property on all directions, that can probably help you navigate of, what areas you want to focus on. Because I'm sure they're all skewing factors.
Absolutely.
So Michael Canales, maybe you're the appropriate one to take the lead and pull all the parties together.
We can work together.
Yeah. Work with Patrick, we can get it done, work with HVA
All right.
anyways, so.
And with our hard stop at 6 and we still have a bunch of things left, I think.
Right, we have some,
Make that the next step.
I just say thank you so much. HV is grateful for the relationship we've had with the town of Stockbridge in the past. It predates.
These guys assessed every culvert in this town with Greenagers, a fantastic organization. And they're right on Main Street in Stockbridge. When they're not down in Connecticut, I know some of you work out of Connecticut. When they're not down in Connecticut, they're right here on Main
We
Street.
did move our Berkshire office to Pittsfield just recently.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we did.
You moved out of Stockbridge?
But
What do you even do?
we remain committed to the relationship and the work that we do here in Stockbridge.
Oh, I'm crushed.
But that was a great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thanks so much.
anyway, thank you. I think we really do need to move on. So
Thank you.
if we can get your names. We also need, and
These aren't gonna be the state map. It's a different date layer, so just to be clear.
we're just about to pass a piece of paper out and get people's names. Okay. Moving right along. Eileen, did we lose you? Are you there? Oh, my God.
Hey, thanks a lot, you guys.
Thank you very, very much.
They have to give it to me in the emails, but can you just give me your phone numbers or cards? Cards are great.
Get a minute to look.
Oh, but Julie has one.
Yeah, if you email me, then.
All right, I'm gonna make it. Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Unfortunately, we've lost, looks like, Michaela, are you still with us?
Yep,
Yes.
I'm here.
Okay, great. I think all your colleagues have
We'll
gone.
be right back.
Oh, no, I'm here.
He just took a pit stop.
Sorry?
Bruce will be back. He just took a pit stop.
The next focus, and really, I'm going to not do this again. The most important purpose of this is to talk about much broader, our trust activities. We've been focused a lot on the Glendale Middle Road project. Oops, Jackie, could you, thank you.
Can't close it.
Thank you, Jackie. But there's a lot of other things that have intersected with our agenda. And right now, I think that the next few meetings are going to be focused on the broad, all of the activities that that have been contemplated and sort of develop a roadmap for us. In addition, right now, we've got the sewer study underway on the Glendale Middle Road, and so that's a key piece of our thinking. But in addition, we've talked about single properties. We've got the new law, the new state law, which allows undersized properties to be developed. We have the issue of the master plan, which we hope to engage with the planning board and get that project underway because it's very critical to our ability to move forward with. We have not, as a town, have not developed a master plan since the 1990s, which puts us very far behind and is a blockade to our raising money at the state level. So that's a key thing.
Not having a plan, a master plan?
Yeah.
No, even, and the housing production plan doesn't,
No, the housing production plan is a key linkage to fundraising. It is important, and we have to have that also. But you also have to have a master plan, and to have ours so far out of date. It isn't our purview to do it, unfortunately. It's the planning board, and they have been reluctant for whatever reason. So I think that's an engagement. But what I'd like to do at this point is talk a bit about a few of the things. First of all, single properties. Michael, we have you back there. And it's perhaps linked to this undersized property development. We've asked the questions a number of times about, are there other single properties? And I think, Don, at our last meeting, you mentioned a couple of properties that you were aware of on Route 7 that might possibly be suitable or might be something that we can, the town can get a hold
Before
of.
we get to that, we should clarify that in order to take advantage of the suite of offerings in the seasonal communities designation, the town has to formally accept the seasonal communities designation. So, part of the planning process we need is to take a look at these lots to make the case if we want to recommend to the town. We're going to automatically be designated by the state based on the number of seasonal residents as a seasonal community, but then the town has to accept that designation. And that would give us the ability to, for example, build on undersized lots.
So that's a step.
A step is the
But we're not-
acceptance by the town, as I understand it, Mike.
Would you say that there's a whole bunch of different sections. So what I will do is anybody that wishes a copy, send me an email and I will send to every member of the affordable housing. I did a comprehensive I did a summary of looking at our bylaws and the Affordable Housing Act. And I cross-reference them to show what the impact would be for Stockbridge. I did that for the planning board and I presented it at their last meeting. I had a review by legal counsel, so I can send you what that specifically means. So I would recommend you put that on the next meeting. I will send that to you later today. So we'll have it, and anybody else would like a copy of it. Actually, Carol Owens is putting it in the next Stockbridge updates. So it'll be.
This is your memo of analysis of the new law.
Yep.
Right, and how it
I had it reviewed by legal counsel also to make sure that it hit all the points. So.
But it also talks about where the conflict, if any, or the requirements to comply are terrific, Michael. Thank you. Thank you very much. So was that discussed at the last planning board?
Yes, it was.
And was there any, can you give us a summary of their conversation?
So the conversation was specifically around how does it impact Stockbridge? What zoning changes have to be made, if any, where we have to address, and then whether or not we want to accept the seasonal designation and what impacts that brings in. Because it does, each of them has requirements. Like if you accept the seasonal zoning, you have to come up with a zoning bylaw for small, tiny homes, and you have to come up with a bylaw for development of undersized lots. So by accepting that designation, then you have to address both of those issues if you accept it as a town. So there's going to be some debate over whether or not the designation should or shouldn't be accepted, and what are the pros and cons. So I just looked at what would be necessary. No opinion on whether it is, that's up to the town to decide. But
Which town is it town meeting?
Yeah.
So it's a town vote, not the select.
It's a town vote.
It's a town vote, town meeting vote to accept the seasonal designation.
That's gonna be interesting. I hope that we can put the burden on the selectmen to inform the town of really what they're voting on, because historically, in my opinion, at this particular moment, a lot of people aren't educated to the point of these new policies at all.
Well, the law just,
Know what they're
the
voting.
law just came out in August.
Right.
It's brand new. The impact, even so they've said that you're allowed to do reasonable restrictions, but the Department of Livable Communities is supposed to come up with the criteria, and they're just doing listening sessions now. It was in the Berkshire Eagle about that. So they haven't even, they're crafting the regulations to go with the law that they passed, but they already passed the law. So there's still a couple things we're waiting on, but I give you an overall generalization of what we need to do. And then as more information comes out, we'll put together, because yes, this is going to take an educated, people have to understand, if you vote no, this is the impact. If you vote yes, this is the impact. And there are impacts both ways.
And
So
just,
the only thing that I didn't get out of that last meeting, because I went to the planning board meeting, and I'm hesitant now when we're being a little cautious. Is there a financial impact if we're declared a seasonal community as it is for like school funding?
No.
This board's funding?
No.
Okay, that was my only question.
no, but the trade-off is, you have more options to build little things for full-time residents. Some people don't want to build more things, but the impact potentially for some of what your local interest is, your local neighborhood interest is it gives more options around the rest of town. It's kind of,
I was
that's the trade-off.
concerned we were gonna lose some critical state funding that.
No, it's
if anything.
really about what your options are, which one you want to take advantage of. Like I said, it is a summary. As more details come out and we get closer probably to the new calendar year, we'll begin putting out a little more information, and then the select board would have to put out the pros and cons for town meeting of accepting the designation, because we should be automatically designated because we do meet the automatic designation.
We should be ready by town meeting for that.
I hope so, yeah.
To accept or deny.
And just as an aside, Peter, I think the law was passed, I think, August 3rd. And I certainly don't speak for the town, but I did write up an extensive article on this on my own thing on August 7th. So, subscribe.
Does the designation potentially negate our zoning of 2-4 acre properties?
Well, specifically, you have to come up with how you're going to address undersized lots.
Yeah.
And that within your zoning, and because they want to make it available to undersized homes, smaller homes, there's a certain restriction around if you have two lots and one's non-conforming, you can develop that lot, even if they're in common ownership, as long as the house doesn't exceed 1,850 square feet. So there's a bunch of nuances right now so what I can do is just get you the summary, so you guys can just take a look at it.
Okay.
And then people can look at it. And as we get more detail from the Department of Livable Communities, we're going to be able to refine that and then bring it to town meeting to see if the town wants to accept the designation or not. And then there's a couple provisions such as accessory dwelling units that are automatically happening regardless of what we do. So that's all detailed in the summary that I have. I will, like I said, as soon as I leave here, I will actually just shoot it out to the trust. And then anybody else that would like a copy, you can either email me or it's going to show up in updates. So.
And can I?
Yeah, it was good. I was at your meeting.
Yeah. I think that as we talk about specific properties, there are two specific properties beyond, looking at whatever might or might not happen on the Morris property. I think we should take.
On Lily Pad Village?
Yeah, I'm not calling it that. I think there's two properties we should take a look at while in the interim, while we're evaluating what these options are for the town that clearly won't be resolved till at least town meeting and possibly after, because then you've got to develop the bylaws and all the rest of it to go with it. The first is looking at the two parcels that abut Heem Court. You've got the roadway, the old, what was Prospect Hill Road before it got rerouted. It's now kind of like an orphan road. Some people use it to cut around, to not have to go down Pine Street and around.
That's a nice one.
That's right. That's right. So there's an opportunity there. And then there's a conservation restricted property next door, but that was restricted to save an ancient pine that has since died. And so it's the question of whether that conservation
At
restriction,
the triangular one.
yes,
Okay.
that had to do with saving the Stockbridge pine at the time, and that pine is no longer on the property. It's basically gone. So I'm just saying that that's one opportunity, is to look at that property. And the second opportunity I think we should look at is, I talked to a guy named Hal Colburn today. Hal owns the building that the Berkshire Waldorf High School is currently in, as you know, I work at that, so I know him, because I've been, paying him rent for 5 years as part of the organization. That building is up for sale, and the Waldorf Schools is leaving to move into Old Town Hall next summer, and it currently has 3 market units in it, where the rents range from $1,200 to $2,100, and the ability, it used to be all apartment buildings back in the day when Vern and and Diane owned it.
They have the Autobahn.
Yeah, they had the Autobahn in the basement there. That's right. So it used to be that the floor that the Waldorf is in used to be an apartment, 1 or 2 apartments, but there's an opportunity to add up to 5 units there.
That's a beautiful building.
It is, and it's for sale now.
Where is this, Patrick?
It's at 14 Pine Street, Pine and Shamrock. That's right. And this is like a very practical thing that's for sale now. And I forwarded around the notice from the state about the pre-application process for some kind of grant, and doing a quick evaluation on whether this makes sense for a pre-application grant that's frankly has a very short timeline, it's a month, but then the actual application is due in March. It might make sense for us to look at something like that as a mixed use kind of thing, where you have 3 or 4 market units, 3 or 4 affordable units. And I think that's right, because it's in town, it's walkable, it's on water and sewer already.
On a parking.
And also, another thing that I think is really important when you're talking about communities like this, you're creating a neighborhood.
That's right.
I mean, you have not only town water, town sewer, but you have these communities now in the neighborhood where these people can walk into town.
That's right.
Go to the library, they can have dinner, they can play pickleball. I mean, it's something, and, walk to Laurel Hill.
Right.
But again, you're creating a neighborhood. Across the street from us, there's no neighbor. We have a neighborhood in Glendale Middle Road.
I hear the neighbors are nice though. Come on.
Invite you over sometime.
You have picnics, right?
I think we really have to look at that. I think they're so expensive.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm bringing it up. I mean, I think that.
There's another house on Shamrock Street also. That will be for sale.
Yeah.
We talked to the woman a couple of weeks ago, and unfortunately, it has to be torn down, but she's going to sell that property.
Yeah.
Again, it's on Shamrock Street, town water, town sewer.
It's just the economics of buying single family homes in a trust like this based on our current level of funding isn't necessarily so realistic. But if we were to, with the ability to create 7 or 8 units in a mixed use property on something like the 14 Pine Street, the building on the corner there, that is maybe more possible to get several $100,000 grant to do the build out for what's now open. There's no kitchens on that floor that the school's on, and the basement was gutted and it's just bare walls. Be a great studio, kind of dark, but for somebody who did a lot of painting or was a curmudgeon. I don't know.
Good idea. What's that?
Didn't we go Boy Scouts there when I was a kid?
Patrick, so articulate this grant. What is the grant that we could go after?
Well, there was an announcement today that has a pre-application due for November 24th for some rural affordable housing grants. What?
Rental.
That's what this would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
You sent out to.
that's the thing I sent out today that I got from Karen, was it Karen Pelto?
Yeah, Karen.
Yeah. And from Berkshire Regional Planning. So, I think we have a number of options. I just feel like, we've got some, unanswered questions. How long will a master plan take? Which Eileen indicated was a necessary, precursor to going for a multi-million-dollar MassWorks grant, which is what it would take to expand sewer up to, look, let's face it, we're looking at something that's kind of far down the road, but But the stuff in town is maybe a little bit more low hanging because it's already on water and sewer. We already know it's right in town and people, we have heating court across the street from both this property and the road. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Don,
We
if
can get started quickly.
something were done on the Pine Street, is there adequate sewer there?
Yeah.
So the capacity can be increased?
Yeah. I mean,
Well, it's already units.
That's not going to affect, that's not going to affect her house.
What's it on the market for?
I think we should look at it, but I think it's listed for 2.1, but listed for a long time.
Where's the property?
Do you know where Heaton Court is? As you're going up Shamrock from the Civil War Monument, you look up, when you get to Heaton Court, right before you get there, you look to the left, there's something that looks like a big apartment building and it says Berkshire Waldorf High School on the outside.
To the right.
It's on the right side. Yeah, Heaton Court's on the left, it's on the right.
It's right at the corner of Pine and
Oh,
Shamrock.
Yeah, that big building. Yeah. Yeah. And I got a keys to it. I mean, if anyone wants to go look at it, I can even give you a tour. Yeah.
The school's still there, right?
Yeah, hey.
Here,
Yeah.
inactive, and the other units are rented?
No, it's Waldorf.
Walden, I'm sorry, yeah.
What's that?
The ones on the lower floor apartments are rented right now?
Lower floor is empty now.
Oh,
So nobody's living there.
The second floor is the Waldorf School. The third and fourth are occupied apartments. There's three of them. And so presuming those tenants would want to stay, those would be the market units.
okay, so there are 3 units there now and they're
And
occupied.
there's an opportunity to add up to 5 more. I mapped it out with the landlord today, with the owner today. Real nice guy. Who's getting a little bit older and wants to sell and, wants to do the right thing. It's really a nice opportunity. Yeah.
All right. So that's another opportunity
Yeah.
on our list. The question in my mind is that we are a volunteer board and there's a limit to all of the activities that we can undertake personally. I'm very much in favor of finding a staff member that we can retain who can help us identify
Staff, like,
consultant,
consult, okay.
a consultant, not an employee, but a consultant. And I'm not real clear whether there's someone with planning. And I think we could become extremely effective with some professional support.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think just looking at, say, the Shamrock, your Waldorf school building, to do a proper analysis on that takes a fair amount of work.
Yeah.
Financial, physical, and then fundraising, because right now the amount of money that we have a couple, like Michael, do you have that statement of that financial?
200,000.
You were gonna, pardon? Right, but do you have that statement you were gonna do for us?
Yeah, I'll get you.
Okay, if you could, that would be very helpful. Anyway, it's my feeling that we should try to think about, the problem is I don't know who we might retain and would be open to everybody's.
I mean, I think it'd be great if we found someone who could help us, interface with Lindsay at the Stockbridge Housing Authority around the Heaton Court property. They did vote to take the next step and explore that. Their board did, so we're in good shape there. And if that person could do a double and look at both of those buildings together as an opportunity, I think it'd be fantastic to get some help looking at those two specific opportunities in town, as a starting point, because they're both practical kind of,
Someone with development skills.
That one.
Someone with planning,
I've been there. Yeah.
development.
The thing is that for this property, that the school, the deadline for this grant proposal for pre-approval is the 24th or 25th.
We could just do a grant to get to do a layout, do the architecture work and come up with a financial plan. It could be like our grant this year would be specifically around, something really practical. We can apply for 100 grand. I mean, not all the grants go up to the full amount. I mean, we could just apply for enough to think about it. And I think also a grant around both properties would be stronger. We've got an opportunity around existing state property, the Heaton Court, approval of that board, opportunity across the street, really, density in the village, build community, all the rest of it.
That says to me, grant writer, somebody who knows the grant system that we're in right now.
Yeah.
And can prepare the documents, because it's just like we found the perfect people that allowed us to get that.
The grant writer, and I don't remember her name, but the grant writer who worked on the Stockbridge, Muncie, Band of Mohicans proposal last year under a deadline and got the #1 ranking she was fantastic. And I talked to her about a year ago about helping. I'll find it out.
Okay.
Writer. She worked under a quick deadline. We hired her with 3 weeks left to go, and we ranked #1 last year with the entire MVP grant process, which brought the lieutenant governor out here to announce that. I'll work on that this week.
Please, that
Writer.
sounds like the ideal person we need.
And Michael, you might know some people too who might be able to help with the pre-application is due the end of November. The grant's due in March.
And the formal application is due in January, I think, isn't it?
No, March. Right. But you have to get through the pre-application or you can't apply for the formal grant. So, we got a bit of they don't give you much turnaround.
On the land trust and Genius too, and we worked with that woman on that Muncie project.
Yeah.
Has there been any interest with the old DeSisto property now that they might consider doing some development out there, the old dormitories from the school?
I thought the land trust was buying that too, weren't they? That's a joke. I'm kidding everyone. That's probably, it's hard to say. We haven't seen anything yet. We haven't seen
That's
it.
a large building. That's large.
Yeah.
I think that's probably beyond our scope to think about. But I think it's a stretch to talk about acquiring something in the multi-million unless we can find this woman. Who knows? Is she local?
We wouldn't be acquiring it. We would be working with somebody who I think the goal would be to try to identify, like one of the area, people who are in this business we're not going to run an apartment building with 8 people or a little volunteer board. I mean, we would have to come up with a plan and including ownership. I mean, yeah.
Which really speaks to the multi-levels of skills because they're planning issues, it's grant writing, it's financial expertise.
Right.
The grant writer needs a program. I don't know how you do, maybe share with us how you work with this grant writer.
Right.
Yeah, the final deadline for submissions, February 27th.
Yeah. So, but we reach out to a CDC or a Berkshire Housing. I saw Eileen at the beginning of the call was on. I mean,
this is the part she was on for and we lost her, which I'm sorry, but I can.
Sure, you always can rearrange, but that's fine.
We are rearranging.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like this is the conversation that we have with a couple of, with a Phil Orenstein or Eileen Peltier or somebody around, we got an idea and opportunity. What do you think? You're the expert at the capital stack, not me, so this is an example.
I'm happy to lend my expertise, but I know how much work it is.
I know.
We need to have people who have both the time and the expertise to do it. So if we can get the name of the grant writer, apps planner, maybe Penrose as a consultant.
I mean, for something like this, it's maybe a minimum of 60 units.
Yeah, no, but.
No way this would be that.
But no, I understand that, but that's for their developments. I mean, they're going to have expertise here on that Lennox property. They're going to have staff here.
Yeah.
So, and the people, you were on that call, weren't you, Patrick, when we talked to Penrose?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they're a very impressive group of people. They do quality work. So the Shamrock Street is an interesting thing. The Heaton Court, we've talked about a lot. I have some connections there that I think would expand that to be a very spectacular project, which we need to start that conversation.
Hey, George.
Hey, great.
And what else?
One thing that would be very worthwhile is to have us explore whether there are options for down payment assistance. for some,
Mhm.
over the next year or so.
Mhm.
Kind of how does one go about doing that? Where would the funds come from? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There's a certain presidential candidate who has that on her to-do list.
They've done it both in Great Barrington and in Lenox, and I'm sure that Fred from the Great Barrington Trust or Mary Beth Mitz from the Lenox Trust can step us through. And it's not just our own down payment assistance, it's also working with local banks.
Right.
I think that's great. Yeah.
All the local banks have federal money to do down payment assistance in the order of $20,000. I mean, you get a good amount.
Where this has worked best is in neighborhoods like Lennoxdale, where there's still houses, because of the proximity to the river, frankly, that are in the couple $100,000 range. Because that's where, if you're going to take a deed restriction for 15 years, you're going to do it if you can get 25 or 50 grand of assistance on a 200 grand house, that makes a lot more sense than if it's a $500,000 house. Boy, that costs you a lot of money in terms of your ability to resale if you're only getting 25,000 assistance. So the numbers tend to work best in relatively low priced, real estate neighborhoods. And we have a couple of pockets of those in Stockbridge, but I think we should put in place and see if it makes sense for someone. But they are giving up the ability to have an upside if they take that assistance. You can't flip it and pull the money out, obviously. So
The trust that has had the most experience is Williamstown.
yeah.
They've been doing it for over 10 years, and they have pockets in their community.
Right.
And I toured it with one of their trust members, and these are $100,000 houses. They're very small.
Yeah. We don't have many of those here.
And I know Michaela's not on any longer, but she looked into that for us. And
But this is where if we were to adopt the seasonal community designation, you've got an ability to, do a tiny home, it makes a lot more sense if you can get in for 50 or 100 grand for some kid for their first house, even before they start a family. That makes sense if you gave 10,000 as a down payment, which is the 20% on a $50,000 Amazon 400 square foot loft, tiny home. I mean, I don't know if the town would ever want to do that, but that's, I think, going to be the model for where maybe that works best rather than, most, when we're up to an average real estate price and what are we up to, like 750? We're about to have a tax classification hearing. What's our average?
I believe it's 800.
800. Yeah. Okay. That's the average. Yeah. So it's kind of, yeah. Yeah. Right.
$10,000 does not make much of a drop in the bucket on that.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's kind of.
All right. In terms of these other, if you will, sort of an overall plan, I think we're certainly beginning the discussion about what our quote plan is. We continue to have the Middle Road property, and I think this presentation today was very, very interesting. And how that information would really support what we're trying to do. We'll see. And certainly we want to participate in it. And I assume, Michael, that you can sort of begin to generate that activity so we can maybe start gathering some of that information with the Housatonic people. All right. Who else would like to put forward?
Well, I think for next year, I think we need to have more expertise as a group in all the alphabet soup of all of the various grants that might be available for, design, site preparation, utilities, whatever it might be. It seems like there's all these levers to pull, and it's a little bit of a blur for a lot of us to know where they all are. And if the state is committing, billions of dollars to housing, there could be new things or things with more funds. And it just seems like that would be an area where having more expertise as a group
I agree.
would be a really useful thing. I don't necessarily have an idea of how we get that, but I'm just saying that should be a goal.
There are people out there. We just have to find them somehow. And I don't know, Eileen, I have spoken to her about thinking she didn't have something off the top of her head to suggest, but she certainly has a lot of connections. So she's one person, one resource. I don't know, Michael, what resources would you turn to for this kind of help?
Depends on the program that we're looking for. We work with consultants if it's environmental grants with different environmental groups. I know which ones. There's a state one stop. There's a couple other locations where you can find that's where Mass Works and others are. So there's constantly stuff popping up. It's just somebody taking a look at it, making sure whether or not we meet the criteria to apply for it, because they're usually specific on what you have to meet.
Yeah.
So do you have a series of people you work with to do these grants, or do you tend to do them yourself?
It depends on the grant. So usually the application is done by me, and usually the technical aspects. For example, there's like the people on. So like last year we did the inland dredging grant. We didn't get it, but what I did most of the writing of the grant itself, except for the technical expertise around the dredging itself. We had GZA do that component because I can't do that. But like the narrative of the town, the demographics of the town, all the other stuff, making sure you have, depending on what it is, such as, here's another example, even when we went after the community development block grant, they had to get our transition plan, our ADA evaluation plan, just getting all those to the right people and making sure that we have the stuff in step. So usually it's bringing on those technical experts. So in this case, right, if we're going to write housing grants, any of us here can do the narrative components and the other, but what we need is the technical expertise. Right. To fill out the technical portions. You're going to need somebody that really knows that information. Smaller grants, a lot of times we can do them in-house, but the larger grants, right, we just recently received, it's going to be an update, it's a $1 million Tuckerman grant bridge, part of the Mass Works grant. Obviously, that was done by me, but the technical aspect was done by our bridge engineer who submitted the technical aspects for it. So, it's a combination usually of working with somebody on it, depending on the level of it.
Mm-hmm.
If they're under, I would say if they're anywhere under like 25,000, typically can be done by volunteers or in-house staff. If you get above 100,000 or get into the $1 million, you're going to need that technical expertise in order to assist you with those portions of the grant.
So now we just find those people. Because it seems to me that as a first step, we don't really know what's out there. So there must be resources that can help us at least identify what's out there.
I think people from Berkshire Housing, others that apply for these grants regularly, if there's any consultants that they use, would be a definite starting point. Or we can look at what the other trusts around the area. Great Barrington has had success with some of theirs. They do work specifically with certain groups, and Lennox also has done recent developments. So asking them who they've used as their consultants when they get into those larger grants and need that specialized.
And you've used the one step, because we talked about this at a prior meeting, and I spent a fair amount of time on their website for the one step state program, and they're supposed to be sort of a gateway into all these other things. And as I recall, you really needed to have something specific and underway. Like we have a real target, a plan, maybe the land, whatever. They're not just going to give you money for like, well, you guys are really, your heart's in the right place. Here's $500,000. Hope you can do something good with it. It's really got to be very.
No, actually,
not so.
Two phases to it.
Okay.
So let me give an example of the small bridge program. One is up to $100,000 for the planning of a small bridge replacement. That allows you to get your engineering assessment, your environmental impacts, and all the rest in order to put in a small bridge. Then you have up to $600,000 that you can get toward the construction of a small bridge. So that's an example of a program. A lot of them have these two-step approaches.
Yeah.
So the one that you don't need a lot of information, you just need the concept on, is the planning grant portions.
But it's still a very specific target. Here's a bridge that needs work and we got to get started.
Well, you still have to identify internally, give them an idea of what you're looking at. So we identified the Second Averitt Road, or in the case of the Mass Works grant that I applied for, the Tuckerman Bridge. So, you need to identify the project, and once you have an idea of something, for example, you just brought up a building, and if that's a possibility of a 5 to 8 room building, is there anything within there that allows you a planning grant for development of small say, under 10 unit housing. So, because a lot of times, anybody that's familiar with grants, there's usually levels. You know, when I say small bridge, that's because it's 10 to 20 feet. Then there's the culvert grants that are under 10 feet. Then there's the regular bridge grants
Right.
that are over 20 feet, and you have large expanse bridges, which is a whole another category up. So which one do you fall in? So in the case of, and I'm making some assumptions here, but maybe there's a grant out there for, you know, for under 10 units for affordable housing. Is there a planning component and is there one there?
Well-
There's something you can look at. If it's a 60, 70 unit one, there might be a different program that you can go under. And a lot of these have a planning component. And if the planning component works, a lot of times it gets you a lot of pluses towards your next component, which is the construction, because they funded the planning one to find out if it was feasible, possible, and will it work? And then if it does, typically you have a good, decent shot. You might not get it the first year. I applied for the MassWorks grant for Tuckerman last year, didn't get it. Got the evaluation back. They identified a couple of places they thought could be improved, reapplied, got it this year. So,
But in terms of, say, the building on Pine Street, you know, you could apply for a planning grant, but we don't own the property. So
You
they
gotta,
wouldn't give us money for something that we don't even have at our disposal.
well, to do that particular project, we've got to put together enough, some sort of not down payment deposit arrangement with the owner.
You're talking about Pine Street project?
Pine Street,
Well, I mean, I know the guy. We'll talk offline.
Right, but
I'm just saying, of course,
as an example, to do any typical real estate deal, you need to have some sort of deposit or an agreement to buy with terms negotiated.
of course, but it wouldn't be us necessarily doing it. It would most likely be a partner who would take the commercial space that's currently a business and convert it to residential as is allowed, you know, in that zone. So, yeah, I get it. I get that we have to go through a process and we need some help.
Right, but no developer is going to work with us. If they're interested, they can just go buy it themselves. They don't need us.
They need, well, yeah, I mean, the question would be to convert the space into residential from commercial for the 2 floors that are that. There may be grants to help do that. And looking at something in conjunction with the roadway, for example, above Heaton Court, like we were talking about, you put those two together and a developer might really get interested. It's a conversation. I'm just saying we should start these conversations and yeah, I don't know.
We just need to have them in short order because we've got a November 25th deadline.
and sometimes you can.
In this cycle.
Even though it's a private project, it can be applied for
Yeah.
if there's proven to be a public good, such as they might agree to the development of a parking lot in order to expand the main street by shopping by 20% brings an economic advantage. Therefore, it's, you know, but it's got to tie back to a public good. So they're not going to let you raise money for somebody unless there's a public interest in the public good out of it. So, you know, you have to look at each individual grant as themselves, but there might be something out there that's available. Yeah.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, could you come forward? Tell us who you are.
I'm George Manley, I live up there. I'm George Manley at 18 Main Street, Taggart House.
Oh.
Down the street.
Okay, great.
Local resident.
Okay, terrific.
But have you ever worked with mass development out of, forget where there you have? So yeah, they have, it's a fund that has state dollars mixed in with private dollars that allows specifically for the renovation of dilapidated or old buildings in Massachusetts. And it was originally put together to, way back when, to convert all the mill buildings in Fall River into new use. But now they're expanding all across the state. They did that old mill building in East Hampton that was turned into mixed use, retail, living, commercial, et cetera. So they're a great resource. They give 0 interest loans. I don't know if they would do it to a town. I know they do it to private enterprise. I've applied for things in the past for different commercial real estate projects I've done across the state, but they would certainly work with any developer that would be interested in redeveloping that property, especially if the town was encouraging the development and or helping them with the rezoning. So it's just a resource I want to mention, mass development. I think it's massdevelopment.org.
Right.
You can just Google it. I know the managing director if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. A huge project in Leo gives mention about, but that's going to be mixed use anyway. Yeah, those are quasi public private partnerships. between the state and the developer, can be the state, the town, the developer, can be multiple groups that get involved.
does anyone know, is that actually happening or something happening? Is this?
Well, that's building now.
Yeah,
Oh, you're talking about the one that took 15 years? The front one? Not the ones up the river.
Oh, I wasn't working on all this is in Lee that I'm talking about.
Right, no.
Graylock is, are you talking about,
You don't switch them.
oh, yeah, Graylock? No? Yeah.
But that's the one right in town. There's two others up.
Oh, I don't think those are being worked on at all.
Okay.
The little ones are being turned into housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One off of, I don't even know what street that is, off of Graylock or something.
Yeah, it's Graylock Mill now.
Yeah, it is.
Is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
what they're calling it?
Yes, that's like a big facility.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Huge.
it's like, yeah.
Well, Eileen is very involved in that. They.
No, yeah, but she's doing Eagle. She's doing Eagle, not Graylock. Graylock's the empty one. It's just, Jamie and Michael, Jan does the housing production plan, was the lead on the housing production plan, and she lives in Southern Connecticut part of the time this time of year. So when do you think you're going to know if we'll be on the November 7th agenda? Because I just think it's reasonable for the 6 members to be able to schedule their.
Yeah, but I'm so.
Okay, can I just know that there's a lot of lengthy items?
Yeah. We haven't met in a little bit, so there's a couple of things on there, but yeah.
I'm just wondering when we can let this group know, because usually we only post days in advance, and for somebody who has to make plans to come up from Connecticut, I want to.
But
I think we can do it the 7th. Chair's okay with it.
I can be very efficient.
There is one public hearing, which will have to happen first. That's not a long one.
Okay.
And the 2 poles and the signs.
Yeah, poll hearings are quick.
Yeah, but
And
on
the
the
sign
signs.
should be last, yeah.
somebody wants to put up a sign.
No, it has to do with taking down the signs. That might, whatever, we can't talk. Yeah, okay.
All right.
It's all right. I mean, no pressure. We could do it later. We don't have to do it the 7th if it's not good. I was just asking about just making sure that we
Jamie,
give a little notice to Jan.
we would like to have as many of our members there.
Yeah.
21st.
I'm sure you understand.
Do you want to decide and let us know tomorrow?
21st.
Well, that's right before Thanksgiving.
That might be worse.
Before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's on the 28th. So
What does that mean
21st.
for you?
I'd have to look at my calendar. I don't.
Busy.
I mean, our 2 meetings are the 7th and the scheduled 21st.
All right. Anyway, Jamie, anything you can do to.
We got another meeting.
Let people, let us know, or Jan
Yes.
is our representative. I'm looking at the clock saying, this is a discussion to be continued.
Motion to adjourn.
I didn't call for that yet.
Any member can make a motion.
All right, and I cannot recognize it. How's that? All right.
Didn't get a second.
It's true, I did not. Not the first time.
I would like to have one final comment. Yes, Michael, what did you want?
Just one thing, just to improve on, one thing that we have to make sure of is there's 2 things that involve with the finance of this board is one, the expenses, which are tracked by the accountant, but the other is committed funds. So I'm not sure if anybody is internally keeping it, but if not, if anytime you vote to appropriate funds for a project, if you could make sure to just shoot me an email. Because what I've done is, we've transitioned a little bit and I'm doing the grant and board and project control document that was recommended by our auditors, which then is also
Sure.
tracking funds that are just committed,
Perfect.
not the ones that are just being expended.
They're all in our minutes. So, and the keeper of the minutes, Liz, right at the moment is,
Yeah, I think probably one of the easier thing is whether it's Patrick or the chair, just right after your meeting, just shoot me an email and say, it was voted to approve 8,000 for this project. And then I can add it to the committed line. I can give you an updated.
Perfect.
What you committed to.
Yeah.
And then what was budgeted.
I'll take.
Did you get the notice of what we voted on to commit to the DPC, to
No, I
DPC?
don't have a final number. I don't think Liz has done the minutes yet. So that's why I just want to make sure Because as you talk about getting into larger commitments, you want to make sure that you don't overcommit.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I think the other thing that we.
We'd like to document that we can share among ourselves so everyone's aware.
Yeah.
So do you have a copy of the proposal from them?
What's that?
Do you have a copy of the proposal from them?
No, I believe the proposal just went to you guys.
So
I know the last bill for Foresight just came in and I saw it, happened to see that it was processed.
we,
Charged to your account, so.
we also have to make sure, remember that the CPC funds we have restrictions associated with how they can be spent. It's really important that proposals to spend money, even after they're voted on the board, but before we start spending, are just sent to town because the CPC board doesn't use, they use town council, and town council has to, we can't expend funds without making sure that it follows the CPC rules. So we just want to make sure that as we vote to approve a proposal, that proposal then goes to the town, just to make sure that we check the box that it's appropriate for CPC.
And eventually, if this board accepts grants or receives outside other money, that you're gonna have to track it all different because of the different requirements of use of each fund. So CPC funds has certain restrictions.
Right.
You have unrestricted funds, and then you may have grant funds that are specifically restricted, and then we'll need to know also what's being committed there.
Well, as we embark on these projects that we discussed today, I would hope that our source of funds is now going to be broader and they will have their own restrictions. So anyway, thank you for pulling that together. So if you could pull together for us everything that you know right now that allows us to check. But the reason I wanted to call you, put you on pause, Patrick, we need to have everybody think about, talk to their friends about what kind of resources we can, and that's specifically grant writers, planning people, town. We have a series of people, of activities that we talked about today. And to launch any of those, we're going to need someone professional to support us.
I hear Jackie's a good grant writer,
Yeah, Jackie, what do you? Yeah, Jackie, are you officially retired? Or are you? We can't enlist you. Anyway, a motion to adjourn.
And a planner. Yeah. Second.
Okay, who wants to second it?
Second.
All is in favor. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.